Well met by moonlight, dear ones. I am Curiosity, and this is my Jamboree, a firelit gathering for explorers of the uncanny, the frightening, and the hard to explain. On Monday, that's Halloween, I'll be premiering a special Jamboree, where I'll be doing something a little different. And I'll be there live throughout the video and as long afterwards as anyone wants to chat. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on the premiere notification when it goes live. Tonight, we spin tales of student stalkers, a deadly outburst at work, and a very tense 10 minutes. So settle in by the crackling fire, lean in close, and make sure everyone has a blanket to keep out the chills. And let's begin. Our first story is from r/Let's Not Meet, shared by MokaAP. I decided to share this with you because it took place exactly 2 years ago, and because I think it can serve to awaken the prudence of some, especially in this season where the days are shortening. So you understand the context, this happened in October 2020, in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. I was 17 at the time, and I had just left Ile-de-France for a provincial town to continue my studies. As a student, 4 hours by train from my parents, I obviously decided to take an apartment, but the prices were unaffordable for me. So I settled in a brand new student residence. It was in the heart of a rich, bourgeois residential pavilion, contrasting with my small student residence. Everything was fine. I went to school as normal, but right from the beginning the teachers tell us that, unlike students in other disciplines, we will have lessons in class, not remotely. So we'll be the only ones to populate this part of the campus. In short, the first classes are going pretty well, even though I have trouble fitting in like the others because of the masks and this nasty COVID. There's also a downside. On Thursdays and Fridays I finish at 8 p.m, which makes me return to my little house at around 8:45 p.m, between the time waiting for the tram that didn't pass often during the lockdown and my walk home. As you can imagine, I was alone on my way to school, but in the last week of September when I went to class in the morning, strangely, I met a man 3 times who was dressed in black, wearing a hood, and whose face I could not really distinguish. What bothered me at the time was the fact that he didn't fit in with the neighborhood's chic environment, but I'm not focusing on that anymore. As usual, in the first week of October I leave school, but unlike other days I take the tram about an hour later, and as usual I wait alone, and once in the tram, I realize that just at the stop there is nobody except the driver and me. So I decided to sit in the 4-seat squares to make myself comfortable. At the next stop, which is still in the campus area, as I turn my head before the doors automatically close, my eyes meet that of the man sitting alone, in black, and in half a second the man blocks the doors that were closing and enters. While the tram is empty, he sits in front of me. Intimidated and understanding that the situation is suspicious, I look away. I prefer to look out the window anyway. The more time passes, the more my instinct leads me to believe that this man might have some bad intentions. In my head, I begin to develop a plan to ensure that the person doesn't follow me when I have to leave. Once the tram arrives at the destination, I decide to leave at the very last moment, just before the tram door closes. As I start walking, I hear a cry and I turn my head. I see the man who managed to get out and obviously pinched his fingers blocking the door. He then begins to walk behind me. This time I'm certain he's following me. As I accelerate my pace, I hear the man do the same. I can even hear his breath coming closer. Then it occurs to me to pretend to be on my phone to frighten him. It worked, at first. Unfortunately, when the man turned round, my phone rang. I was sure he heard it, and therefore understood it was all a deception. I turn around to see the man slip something into his hand, but I can't tell what it was because of the dark. Then he starts screaming and running at me, and although I'm terribly out of breath, I rush to run into a neighbor of mine. I throw myself into their arms and shout loudly, "Great, you came to get me!" At my words, my neighbor immediately understood the severity of the situation and walked me home. Before that, I turned round one last time and nothing. The man had disappeared. The next day I decided to make a statement to the police. During the day they called to tell me that the surveillance videos of the tram had revealed the identity of the person. He was a wanted man for both SA, and armed robbery. Apparently he found pleasure in assaulting rich girls to humiliate them before robbing them. That's why he prowled in my neighborhood. It made my blood run cold, and I decided to go home to my parents. Apparently the man was found 2 weeks later in another city, after assaulting a young girl in a store. The moral of this story? Pay attention to your surroundings, especially at night, and above all, there is nothing better than following your instincts. Still to this day, I talk about it with my neighbor. He confessed to me last year that he often remembers the scene, and especially remembers my face, stricken with fear. He says he was deeply shocked. Even if this story did end well, it's developed in me a kind of distrust. I remain on my guard, especially when it comes to meeting people with hoodies, and now I keep a pepper spray in my bag. Another case of quick thinking and good instinct saving the day. I'm glad the man was eventually caught, although it's such a shame he had to hurt somebody else before he was. Our next story is from r/creepy encounters, posted by Cobra Clutched. And be warned, dear ones, this story escalates quickly. I just started a new job working for a mortgage company in Woodland Hills, California. We had to do about 2 weeks of training in a classroom before they would release us to the floor to start in our position. I befriended my neighbor, who told me he was a stand-up comedian on the side, performing on Comic View and a couple of local clubs. After work, we would smoke out in the parking lot and he'd crack jokes on this Asian guy that was in our class. I thought it was bizarre, personally, because he was a grown man acting like a high schooler. The next day after work, he starts in on the same guy again, goofing on his car. I remember he had a 1980s Honda CR-V with the paint chipped all over it. I asked him why he was picking on the guy and he just shrugged it off. He confessed to me some of the issues in his life. His best friend had tried to kill him and his ex-wife had plotted to have him killed with her boyfriend, maybe at the same time. It was a warning sign of something ominous about to happen. The next morning we were split up into groups to work on the computer. I was partnered with the comedian, who was on one side with me, as well as a guy on the other side who'd just been discharged from the Marines. I was talking with the Marine when all of a sudden the comedian falls on top of me, knocking me out of my seat. I look up, and that Asian kid has a butcher knife and is stabbing the comedian repeatedly in front of me. He was able to push him off and run out the door. All he said was, "What the fuck, man? I don't even know you." The attacker is staring dead at me now with murder in his eyes. He never takes his eyes off me while holding the kitchen knife covered in blood. I look at the trainer, and he's rushing all the other classmates out of the room. I tried talking to him, saying, "Hey man, everything's all good, no worries." He says not a word, just stares at me. I waited for all the classmates to leave, and I slowly start backing up to the door. My first thought is, if he lunges at me, this is gonna get ugly. He stares at me as I back out of the room, and the look he had still haunts me. It was a look of regret, like he knew at that moment it was over. He threw his life away. The trainer held the door closed so he couldn't get out. About 10 minutes later, smoke started coming from the room. I went to my car and left to clear my head. As I was leaving the property, about 5 cop cars and a fire truck flew right past me. I come back after an hour or so, and one of the officers charges up to me screaming at me, "Where the f*** were you? We have multiple witnesses that say you knew the victim and why he may have been stabbed." I said to the cop, "I don't know why he was stabbed. Go ask the kid that stabbed him." The cop didn't like that answer. They charged into the room and arrested him as he was trying to burn the whole building down. The next day, we all showed up to class, except for the comedian. They sent a trauma counselor to talk to the class, and asked me since I was there alone with the guy if I needed to talk. I cracked some joke like, "I'm good, it's just another day in LA." The class started laughing, but the counselor wasn't amused. The comedian was in critical condition, but survived. As for the would-be killer, I found his friends were shocked he did this. He was expecting a son. Maybe that was the look he gave me, the regret that he wasn't going to be there for his child. OP rounds out this tale by adding, "Life is a trip, man." Whew, you said it. Clearly something was going on in that man's life to push him over the edge like that. Our last story is from DruneArgor, who reached out to me with this story of one very close call. I was 18 years old, had graduated high school and was looking forward to starting college in just a couple of weeks. I'm a tall guy, a bit over 6 foot, and was lanky in build back then. My dad and I had a yearly tradition of going on a trip to Reading, where we'd stay at a hotel for the weekend and go to the water slides, see a movie, grab dinner from a fancy restaurant or two, and just generally have a good time away from the house. It was Saturday, and we'd gone to the water slides all day. Once the sun was setting, we decided to go to In-N-Out for dinner, and then had planned to go to the movies later in the evening. We were going to go see Rush Hour 3, but on this particular occasion my dad had gotten pretty wiped out, and decided he'd just go relax at the hotel. I still wanted to go to the movies, and he said it was okay. He dropped me off at the movie theatre, which was only a couple of miles from the hotel we were staying at, and I told him he didn't have to wait up for me. I'd just walk back after the movie. While I was waiting in line, I noticed there were a surprising number of people around my age, all going to see a movie called Superbad. It was starting 10 minutes later than Rush Hour 3, and I was so curious to see what it was about that I changed to that movie. It was a great time. The movie let out close to midnight, and I was full of energy. The moon was full, and it was a warm night in Reading, low 70s, so I was in good spirits, as I started a leisurely walk back to the hotel. On my way back, I noticed a silver car pulling out from a nearby tree. It was late, and in a quieter part of the city, so there wasn't a whole lot of traffic at the time, so it was notable. It slow rolled up to me and the passenger window rolled down. Inside was a guy who might have been in his late 20s or early 30s. He was clean-shaven with dark hair and decently dressed. He asked me if I needed a ride. I thought it was a little odd, but he was smiling and seemed friendly enough. I'd had such a good day and was still full of energy though, so I said no thanks, and told him I was just going to walk back to my hotel. His smile faltered for a moment, and he asked if I was sure. I nodded, assuring him I'd be all right. He shrugged his shoulder and asked one last time if I was certain. I said yeah, and I then began to walk. He drove off, and I thought that was the end of it, but it wasn't. About 2 minutes later, I was still walking along the street and I saw a car coming on the opposite side of the road. There was a concrete divider on the center of the road, and it only had a couple of areas where cars could turn around. I'd been distracted with my own thoughts and wasn't looking for it, but I thought it might have been the same car. I glanced back and I could just barely see where the road curved. The car turned around and came driving back my way. Now I knew it was the same car with the guy I'd talked to earlier. I saw him looking at me as he passed by me again. Chills went down my spine. I began to walk faster, but not too much, as I was giving him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he thought he'd forgotten something, but then realized he hadn't. Either way, I was paying attention. Sure enough, as I walked forward, I saw him drive by on the opposite side of the road again. Any doubts I had disappeared, and now I was on edge, ready to bolt if I saw his car slow down next to me. I saw him drive by again, but also some other truck drove by on the opposite side of the street, and his car passed me by. At this point, I couldn't see where he could turn round, but I knew the streetlights he could use weren't too far ahead either. I looked around, and across the street from me were some businesses, and they had bushes in front of them. I waited till I couldn't see the silver car anymore, and I ran across the street and hid behind the bushes, using them for cover. I watched and waited. I tied my shoes tight as my heart was pounding, hoping he wouldn't come by again, but he did. I saw his silver car drive by my hiding spot, and let out a sigh of relief when he didn't suddenly decide to drive into the parking lot where I was, but I didn't move either. I knew he could turn around again, so I kept waiting. He drove by again on the opposite side of the street. I then started counting for 10 minutes. 600 seconds. I decided that if I saw his car drive by, I would start again. I'd still be ready to run just in case. The 10 minutes went by, and I didn't see his car again. I got up and shakily made my way back to the hotel, keeping any eye out for new cars coming my way. None did. My dad woke up when I got back to our hotel room, and I told him what happened. He got up and took a look around the hotel parking lot before saying we should lock the door, draw the curtains, and get some sleep. We left early the next day. I'm really glad I didn't get into that guy's car that night, because I just recently heard that there'd been a number of kidnappings in that area around that time, with people getting taken after getting into seemingly friendly strangers' cars at night. The sun is rising and rinsing away the twilight mist. The jamboree is at an end once more. My thanks to everyone who sent in stories or gave me permission to narrate theirs. Remember, I upload new stories on Mondays and Fridays, so be sure to subscribe and click the bell icon so you don't miss out. If you have any thoughts about the stories I've narrated, why not leave them in the comments below? And don't forget, if you enjoyed your time by the fireside, to carve the like button into the bark of a tree so you never forget it. If you'd like a story of yours narrated, I have a submission form linked in the description, and I would love to learn more of your curious experiences and unexplained happenings. I will see you soon, dear ones, and until then, may your nights be dark and your dreams just a little curious.